Alright, welcome back. Let's waste no time and try to create something new. Go into edit mode, then side view, and then select this group of vertices and extrude them once on the y-axis. Then what we're going to do is extrude them another time and rotate them to have this angle here, so it's more natural with what we're going to do next. Extrude them on the z-axis, then flatten them using SZ0. Extrude them another time, rotate it. Extrude it once again, about there. Rotate it again. Extrude it. Then guess what? We're gonna rotate it? No, joking. Extrude. Add loop cuts where you want your corners to be sharper. I'm just gonna add one there, and move them here so it's sharper without adding loop cuts necessarily. Delete this edge. Then what we're going to do is make this align with what we just created. Add a loop cut here. And what you can do is add another one and another one until they match the number of vertices that you have on this shape here. So slide them using G twice. Then what we need to do is match the curvature. So what we're going to do is move them inward a tiny bit. And just press F to fill this area. Now, slide this one here, so it has like a sharper crease here. Select those two vertices, extrude them once, then scale them to make them wider. Fill this area here and there. Slide it back so it's prettier. Okay, so we just need to fill this area. Select those two and press F to create an edge there. Then slide this one here, select this edge and two vertices, then just press F. We're going to add then a loop cut to match the number of vertices that we have at the bottom, and fill this area by pressing F 2 times. Then just move this up a tiny bit so it's prettier. Slide this one here. It's flat, so it shouldn't matter too much. Okay, you don't need to delete this face. Just a mistake that I made here. Okay, so select those two vertices, connect them together, add a loop cut there. Then we're going to press F twice, then another time here to fill this area. And now it's looking quite good. To connect it to here, what we're going to need to do is add some loop cuts. So instead of just pressing F, what we need to do is create our protective rim over here before. So select those vertices, then just extrude them and try to match the angle that we have on the front here. So select those 4 vertices and just press F and press F over here to connect them. Add loop cut until about here and just press F to connect it over there. Same shit here, just a loop cut, slide it. Okay, now to face this area. Select those vertices and extrude them here. Then we're going to connect those, and you can just make them flat by changing your pivot point to active element, then SZ0, and then you can connect them together so they're tangent and flat and perfect. Selecting those two vertices, we're going to extrude them and try to match the curvature. We're going to just make them flat using SZ0 and SX0, so they're flat on both axes. Then just connect them together. That looks about right. We may need to re-topologize this area a bit later on. Select those and extrude them downward a tiny bit. Then selecting them again, what we want to do is try to match this curvature. So move them inward on the x-axis. Just slide this one here and connect them together by pressing F. So yeah, let's try to make this smoother by just aligning them better, and you can add a loop cut there to make it sharper. Shade it smooth here, and we're just gonna take a look at where it's going. And we need to fix this area because it looks a bit messy right now. So selecting those vertices, slide them a tiny bit, slide those here. So if it doesn't cause too much problems on your side, then just don't touch it. For me, it looks alright. So we're gonna leave it at that for now. Selecting those vertices, what you want to do. Yeah, selecting those vertices. What you want to do is extrude them to the rear of the car. Then just select those and we're gonna move them up a tiny bit so they don't touch our fender. That would be quite unfortunate. Add loop cut and another one until they match the number that you have on your wheel well. Once this is done, we may need to connect them together by pressing F over here. I forgot to loop cut there. Alright, this looks pretty damn good. Okay, now for this part. What you want to do is select those vertices and then move them inward so they're at an angle and not just perfectly flat. Then we're gonna fill this area, my bad. Add loop cuts until they match the same number that you have at the bottom. We're gonna add another one here because I forgot. And then selecting those vertices, what you want to do is select the bottom one and move them on the y-axis so they're a bit closer to the rear. Then extrude them here and do the same thing. Extrude them until they clip on the x-axis. Now, fill this area by pressing F twice. Add the loop cut here to tighten this edge loop. Just trying something. Doesn't mean you need to do it. It's more of a design choice. But you can just add loop cuts here and there. Deselect those and then move them inward a tiny bit if you decided to do what I did, which is just create a kind of a border. Deselect those and do the same for the bottom ones. Okay, select those two edges and then move them on the y-axis to mimic what we did on the side. Add loop cut here to sharpen it. And we're gonna do the same over there on the bottom. And we have a very nice trim here. Looks a bit glitchy on the side, but don't worry, it's gonna be hidden by a whole lot of stuff, including... Okay. I'm just gonna rework that area a tiny bit. So move this on the y-axis until you're happy with it. You don't need to do it if you like the way it looked before. Then time for a magic trick. On this area in the front. So go into wireframe mode, select those three vertices, and turn on auto merge, and slide them until they collapse with the other one. Now select those two faces, delete them. What we need to do then is, let me think about that, but you're gonna see that we're gonna fix this area. So select those vertices, create a quad here. Then what we want to do is fill this in. You can see it looks much better than before. So rewatch that part slowly if needed. Now I'm not really happy with the shape of this area, so I'm just gonna rework it by sliding some vertices around and experimenting. And feel free to do the same, or just skip ahead until you see I'm not working on this part anymore. If you don't want to do it, but honestly it's worth it. So I'm not sure if I like this look, so I'm just gonna reselect those and slide them back where they were. And yeah, that looks alright, but I think we can do a bit better. Now select those vertices, those 3 vertices there, and then extrude them over here to create the protective loop around your area. Then slide this one closer until it aligns or so with the vertex we just created and fill this area. We're gonna do the same over here, so select those 2 vertices, extrude them down, press F to fill, add a loop cut there, and just fill again. Oops, my bad. Just okay, add a loop cut there. Then we're gonna select those and move them up to restore the curvature that we just edited a bit by adding a loop cut. And then what you're gonna do is slide those upward to space them out more evenly like that. Alright. What we can do next is select this vertex, just extrude it on the y-axis. Then what I'm gonna do is make those, the bottom of the fender equal to the one on the front with SZ0. Then I'm gonna connect the vertex we just created with the bottom of the fender and add a loop cut and slide it very close to the end of that line to create a sharp corner. Just like this. Select those 2 vertices, then extrude them upward just a tiny bit, and you can scale them or just move them on the y-axis so they're easier to connect in a pretty fashion. Now select those vertices, connect them together. Then for this part, this is a bit more tricky. We're gonna delete this face here and add a loop cut there. And then we can connect those 2 together. Perfect. Now I'm gonna shade the smooth to get a better view of what we're doing. Okay, select those 2 vertices, connect them together, add a loop cut, and move it over here. Then connect those 2 faces, and we're gonna connect those together before, after adding a loop cut there. So we have a protective loop that runs across the fender. Alright, add a loop cut there, move this over here to restore the curvature. Then fill this one here, and then move it over there, press F again. Then we're gonna need to add a loop cut here. Press F so it connects with this one. Slide it, sorry, and connect it here. Now add the loop cut there and fill this area in. Now we will run into a problem here where our side is not very flat nor beautiful, and this is something we will need to fix. So select those 2 vertices, add a loop cut there. Yeah, we're gonna experiment with different things. So selecting those 2 vertices, you can move them inward to make the side a bit flatter. What I would do then is move those vertices in a tiny bit. Now this is nothing precise, it's all personal preference, but it's to a certain extent. So you can see here it's not what I wanted to go for, so it's important that we fix it. So I'm just gonna slide some vertices around to make it prettier and to kind of make the rim more equal all around. Alright, selecting those 2, I'm just gonna move them in so it doesn't stick out as much as before. So I'm just gonna repeat this process for those as well. Just move it here. Now for this hole. It's a pretty easy fix. We can basically just add a loop cut or connect them together with auto merge if you don't see any problems, since it's a very flat area and the triangle won't cause any problem over here. So add loop cut to tighten this edge here. And then what we're gonna do is work on it a bit more. So delete those vertices because I want to move this area down until like it reaches the bottom where our fender used to end. So I'm just gonna delete those because I felt like they looked kind of off, and I'm just gonna flatten this area by setting my pivot to active element. Then I'm gonna add loop cut until I have the same amount on both sides and just face this area using F. And I think you get the sense of what we're doing. It's not the first time we're doing it anymore. Okay, selecting those vertices, what I want to do next is just move them outward a tiny bit to have kind of the same depth all around. Okay, select this edge loop over here, and you can just extrude it a tiny bit and then move it inward to have kind of this rim, and we can just sharpen it using a loop cut. You could also use a bevel modifier set to weight and adjust it manually, but I prefer loop cuts. Now we want to move this inward a tiny bit so that the crease runs across the whole length of the body like this. And this is still experimentation, so we may change stuff in the future, or we may decide to just get rid of some parts. So don't worry, it's part of the process. And do just what you feel like it looks good. Alright, I'm just gonna adjust this a tiny bit more. So don't hesitate to go into a rendered view using cycles idly to just preview what your vehicle looks like with the shadows and stuff. This is what I'm doing right now, adding loop cuts to see if a crease will look good there, or if I need to tighten some areas, or if the surfaces even look great. Just gonna move this down here so it looks prettier, and it restores the curvature that we probably lost while adding this earlier. Alright, so what I'm gonna do next is select those vertices and just move them in so we have kind of the same thickness all around. Because we used to have a very thin edge on this side while it was a lot thicker on the top. And this is important to try to make your stuff look natural, or at least looks like someone intended to do this and not just the result of luck or randomness. So just like before, I'm just gonna adjust it until I'm happy with it. Feel free to skip ahead if you're happy with yours. Yeah, I still have this bump that annoys me a tiny bit. So I'm gonna try to make it more apparent. This is a way you can fix stuff in design, is by making your mistakes more apparent. Yeah, basically. You want to exaggerate them so they feel a lot more natural and like what you intended to do, and it can turn to like a signature of that design if it's well executed. Now selecting those faces, what we're gonna do is tighten them a tiny bit by moving them in so it's not as bumpy as before. Okay, now we're gonna declutter this area. So just slide this in, and then what we need to do is delete some faces. So like this one, delete it. What we're gonna do next is delete this one as well and move them down like this. Add loop cut over here. And then we're gonna merge those two at last. So we have a straight line running across over here. Then add another loop cut there. And we can fill this in like that. So we're just gonna make this transition a bit smoother by sliding some vertices around so it doesn't look as janky as before. So you can see it's still a bit bumpy, but it's already much better. So we're gonna rework that area a bit more later on. Now for the bottom. Select those vertices and we're gonna move them down until they reach about the same place as the rear fender ends. So we're gonna move those upward on the back. Okay, now for this area. Let's just move this down a tiny bit more. Okay, this looks pretty alright, I would say. For the roof now, let's just delete this edge over here and select those vertices, then go into side view. And then we're gonna extrude them once. After that, you're gonna set your pivot point to bounding center of the bounding box, I think it's called. Okay, so move it over here at the same angle that we had before. And then I want to select those two and move them inward. So we have a pillar that has a bit more depth and not just as flat as it was before. So extrude them once more and always try to keep the same angle when you're in the front. Like when you extrude on the side, it only moves on the Y and Z axis, not on the X. So try to keep that in mind. So extrude it once again on the Y axis and then another time until they collapse at the center. Selecting those, we're just gonna delete those vertices that we didn't need anymore. Selecting our roof, I'm just gonna make them a bit wider so it looks more proportionate, and add loop cut at the base of the A-pillar. Okay, what we want to do next, let me think about that. Select those three vertices, add the loop cut over there, yeah, and select those. Now extrude them downward a bit and move them in on the x-axis. Same things for the vertices in the back with the y-axis, then add loop cut there so it creates like a very sharp rim. Select those two vertices, then go into side view and extrude them about the same length as we did on the back. And then what we're gonna do is move them inward a tiny bit to replicate the same effect that we had before. Add loop cut there, make it sharp, and then just connect them together. And now we need to connect it to the base of the windshield. So add the loop cut there, so we have the same number all around. And then I'm just gonna select those two and connect them together. Add loop cut, slide it down, and finish off this area. Perfect. Now I'm just gonna see and check if our loop cut that we added did any damage on the front shape. It looks like it's not too bad, but I'm just gonna slide it down and even merge it at the base of the windshield, of the A-pillar, sorry, with auto merge turned on. And you gotta be careful to not cause any artifact while doing this. So I'm just gonna merge it later on to a place where it has like a flatter area or an area that's less visible. So always try to keep that in mind. And yeah, our base mesh is looking pretty good, honestly. Let's finish this second part real quick. So add loop cut over here, and we're gonna create this C pillar. Connect those pair of vertices until you have the shape that you want. So I really want a thick pillar over there. So I'm just gonna slide in until I'm happy with the angle. Add loop cut in the middle to match the number that you have at the bottom. Then connect this area and just gonna add loop cut at the top and the bottom to make the corners a bit sharper. Then select this edge loop over here and we're gonna create a rim around it. So just turn off auto merge to be sure, then extrude. Then we want to move it on the x-axis and just scale it down a tiny bit to create this rim basically. Just like that, and you can add a loop cut around it to make it sharper. I would recommend it. And yeah, don't forget to turn off auto merge Otherwise, you may run into problems with vertices merging with each other, and that's really not fun. Just gonna slide this down a tiny bit more. And move it in so we have kind of a bit of depth. And I'm gonna add another loop cut. Same here for the front, for the top, my bad. I just deleted it in the end. I didn't really like the look. Alright, this is looking pretty damn good. Modeling is almost finished, don't worry. After that, it's just smooth sailing from there. Okay, select this edge loop, and then what we want to do is extrude it to create a rim. I'm just gonna add a loop cut here to make it less flat. Just gonna retouch this area over here, just like that. Now I'm trying different stuff. You don't need to do it, or if you think it's ugly, then just skip it. Doesn't really matter. I'm gonna select those vertices and move them down so the rim of the roof is thicker. Yeah, sorry about that. I forgot to turn on the stream keys. Okay, selecting those vertices, I'm gonna deselect them using circle deselect, which is C. Then I'm gonna press extrude, then S to scale them down. And then I'm gonna move them a tiny bit. Scaling them again to create this edge and moving them inward over here. Just like that. I'm gonna add loop cut here to tighten this area. And then we should have 2 on both sides. So just connect them together, add loop cuts until you have the same number at the top and the bottom, and just fill in this place right here. Pretty nice, pretty nice. Now for the rear, let's just delete this one. And then what we're gonna do is rotate it here so it's higher up. Just like that. And don't hesitate to rework any areas if you feel like you're not happy with the shape. I'm just gonna select this place here, this loop. Then I'm gonna use the main crease value and slider to play with some tightening effect, which crease will basically move edges created by subdivision surface closer together, but I'm not really happy with how it looks and usually can create artifacts if you don't use it properly. So I try to avoid it as much as I can, or use it only for like small details or models that needs to be polygon optimized. Selecting those faces, I'm just gonna delete them. Then I'm gonna dissolve this loop and this one here. And we should have a quad. So try to do this and see how it looks, because I felt like this area was very cluttered before. And we have kind of a weird bump going on. So here you can see we have 2 vertices, so just watch out for that when we're gonna do this. So select those 2, extrude them, and then rotate them a tiny bit, extrude them again. And what we want to do is flatten the bottom and connect them over here, just like that, to create kind of a similar shape that we had on the side. I'm just gonna tighten this up here and move it up again. And now you can see it's a bit too straight for my liking, so I'm gonna move them inward on the x-axis, and same thing for the middle. Now you can see that we have one more vertices over there, so I'm going to add a loop cut here to create the protective rim. And we have this shape over here. Okay, I'm just going to slide them back so they match with the top vertex over here and move them in a tiny bit more. So yeah, just play until you're happy. Selecting those, I'm just gonna extrude them on the x-axis to create kind of a rim. And once again, the stream keys, I forgot. I'm really sorry, by the way, first tutorial, so pardon me for my mistakes. Selecting those 4 vertices, just face this area over there, and we're gonna create a rim here. Select those 2 vertices, extrude them so they're about the same height. Set your pivot to active element, then SZ0, so they're flat. This is very important. At least in this case, it is. Now this doesn't look too bad, especially, but we will need to rework that. So select those 2 vertices and just move them up. Or wait, we can just try to slide this in. Okay, select this vertex and then extrude it once at an angle, then once on the z-axis, then restore that same angle by extruding another time. Turn off clipping, or else you won't be able to extrude. Extrude it once on the x-axis so it's tangent, then once again, add loop cut on the top to match, and then connect those 2 together. Just gonna slide them up so they're a bit straighter. Slide this in over here. All right. Just gonna extrude those vertices over there. My bad, I didn't mean to extrude, I meant scale. But yeah, now we're extrude them. Okay, extruding them, just select and connect them here. We're gonna add loop cut there so they match with the number of vertices that we have at the bottom here. Connect them by pressing F. Then we're gonna select this edge or those 2 vertices and we'll be able to connect them together. Perfect. Now you can see what happens when we don't have any protective rim around a hole. It creates this weird stretching. So that's what we're gonna need to do is create this rim. So I just extruded 2 vertices and then made them flat on the Y and Z axis with the vertex that we just created before. And I'm gonna repeat this process for the top. So SZ0, SY0 to make them flat, and then fill this area in and do the same for the middle. Just gonna straighten them by using SX0. Okay, now we can just tighten those and I'm gonna shade everything smooth. Right now this looks alright. This looks pretty good. And we're gonna rework that area a bit later on. So don't worry too much about the topology for now. Okay, select those 2 and set your pivot to bounding box center. Scale them down so they're not as tall as their parents. Move them in right there. Now this needs a bit of tinkering. And so that's why it's okay to just come back to an area, because sometimes you just don't want to spend that much time right now fixing this topology. So I'm just gonna slide this one over here and dissolve it because we don't need it right now. And yeah, just make it back like that. It's much easier to add loop cuts than to play around with them, I believe, at least. Okay, now I'm just gonna move this here and make some place for loop cuts that we're gonna add over there. Just like this. Okay, slide this here, and I'm just gonna connect those, even if it's a triangle, because it's a bit of a cheat code since our tail lights, my bad, will be there. And so the surface underneath doesn't really matter. Still want to slide them over here to make it a bit tidier. Just gonna add a loop cut here and experiment with the design. So feel free to remove it, my bad. Gonna do the same thing at the top, although I'm not sure about it, so I'm just gonna remove it. And yeah, it's a bit of a lazy way, so let's just try to do this in a better way. So adding a loop cut at the top, I'm just gonna slide them over here to restore the curvature that we just destroyed. And then delete this face here. Yes, exactly, that's good. So connect those bottom and top. This will create kind of a protective loop that will prevent our triangles from interfering with the border that we had before. So I'm just gonna slide this here, connect it here and there. Yes, it's triangles, but like I said, the tail lights will be there, and we will just cut through those panels, so it doesn't really matter that much. So you can even skip ahead if you want, although I will recommend you watching what's next. So I'm just cutting a hole here to see where the tail lights will be, to see if they will indeed cover up this mistake. Just gonna slide this in. Right there. Okay. I'm gonna extrude those vertices and then move them so they follow the curvature that we have here. Then I'm gonna make some triangles here and finish facing this area like that. And let's see how it is. I'm just gonna move this in. Same for here. Still not quite happy with how it looks. And the problem may be here. So I'm just gonna delete those faces, add loop cut there, and then we're gonna connect those together so we have a loop that flows to the top here, and just create this triangle. Yes, it's a triangle. They're not that bad, okay? They are, but they have use cases. So I'm just gonna slide those over here and just try to, so it's still quite bumpy, so I can rework that area in. So I'm just gonna move this over there, y-axis and x-axis. Just try to make this as pretty as I can without going insane either. Okay. That's not too bad, I would say. Now we may need to move those triangles elsewhere, because right now they're causing some issues. So what I'm gonna do is select those faces and then delete all of them. Around here, add loop cut there, make sure auto merge is on, slide them over here, fill in this area right here, okay, and fill in this part here. So yeah, you can see it's a lot tighter now, it's a lot better. We're just gonna slide some stuff around. So those two vertices, just select them, move them outward. I'm gonna do the same for this other spot right there, just above. Move it here so they're a bit more natural, and you can see the bumper goes in, which is not normal and shouldn't happen. So just select those vertices and move them outward if yours was like this. So that's a big mistake. Your bumper should never, at least, unless it was your intent, it shouldn't go up. Slide this here, just make it a bit tighter. All right. Next, what we can do, I believe, this part could be adjusted a tiny bit. So just play around with it. If you're happy, sure, go on. I'm gonna add some loop cuts over here and over there to tighten those edges, and you can see it looks a lot better now. So if your design seems to be kind of wobbly, just add loop cuts or bevels or whatever, but just make sure that it's not just some tightening of corners that holds your design back. I would say that's quite important. Now for the roof, because I think that's the only part left for the base mesh. I'm just gonna move them a tiny bit. Add loop cut there, then move them on the y-axis. Just like that, yeah. Select those 3 vertices, and then we're gonna extrude them at a slight angle. For the first one at least, then we're gonna extrude them on the y-axis, and make sure to extrude them as many times as you have vertices on like the rim of your roof. I don't know how it's called in English, sorry for that. But yeah, just extrude them until they're about there. Now I'm gonna add loop cuts here and there to match the number that I have on the side. Now you can see that I missed one, so I'm just gonna add a loop cut there and fill this area in. So this area may need a bit of tinkering, but it's not too complex, so it can be easily solved with a loop cut. Just slide this back in where it was. That's perfect. Okay, so face this area, just like this. Now for the windshield. Windshields can be a bit tricky, but this one is quite simple, so we're lucky. But if you have like a supercar, or sometimes with stuff with like bigger curvature, then yes, they can be tricky. And make sure there is no bumps, no unwanted bumps on your windshield, because everyone will notice them, even if you think they will not. So believe me, try to avoid bumps at all costs. And try to avoid flat windshields. So what I'm gonna do now, after facing this area, is just selecting those vertices at the bottom and moving them on the y-axis. And I want to make sure that I move all vertices, because if not, then it will create just weird slopes or bumps that is unwanted. Make sure there's no bumps, and we can move on right after. So I'm going to create this rim that I talked about earlier on the windows. So I'm going to select those loops and extrude them on the x-axis. And then I'm going to those vertices, and setting my pivot to active element. I'm going to press S, X, then 0, and you can see that it was too much of the variation. So I'm going to deselect and turn off auto merge, and then I'm going to press X, X, 0. And yeah, we have our rim created. And the base mesh is pretty much done, I believe. I'm going to tinker a bit more with the shape on my side and play around with some issues. And feel free to do so. So you can see here the windshield wasn't pushed enough forward, I believe. Just gonna correct that and do the same for here. Okay, this area looks clean. The back too. Okay, roof is alright, it's straight. Now for the wheel arches, this is a pretty simple process. So I'm just gonna select those two edge loop, then extrude them on the x-axis, then flatten them out using SX0. Move them in a tiny bit. That's not what I wanted to do. I'm gonna set my pivot point to individual origins. That's not needed, honestly. I'm just gonna fill them right after to have two ugly faces, two big n-gons that I'm gonna separate. And since they're flat, we can just turn on auto smooth and leave them like this. We may need to turn down the subdivision count to 2, since now it's at 4. After that, what we're gonna need to do is add some loop cuts, since it just smoothen our faces here. And yeah, that's it. Last step before we're done with the base mesh. What we're gonna do now is tighten those edges that we just made smoother by extruding for the wheel arches. So just add loop cuts here and there, just like that. And one here just for good measure. Okay, that looks pretty clean. Now we're gonna rework some areas just to tighten some places that may not look as good as they could. This is an optional step, but I strongly recommend you do it, especially if your surfaces are not very clean. It will make a big difference in the end. So I'm just gonna slide those around just to distance them. And then I'm gonna switch to the zebra matcap. One of them, both can work. And so try to gauge the areas that need work. Basically, you can see that some lines are not as straight as they should be. So we're gonna be taking a look at that. So I'm just gonna slide this here, over there, and make sure to switch quickly, well, not quickly, but frequently between your matte cap and your solid view, just to check how the surfaces look and if you improve them or they still need some work. And there are no like perfect rules, I would say, but try to guess and try to just evaluate what needs to be worked on. And sorry, I wish I could have explained this better, but really it's more of a what looks good is good, basically. Like if it looks normal, then you're probably on the right track. If it doesn't, then it needs to be reworked. So I try not to model for too long with this matte cap because it makes my head hurt. So I'm just switching between matte cap, wireframe, and all of them just to see. So here I'm reworking this area just so the lines are straighter. So you can see they're still a bit bumpy, so I'm gonna play with them, with the line a tiny bit. So just do this all around your model, and your places that need work might not be the same as me, because this is especially sensible to like small changes. And so just slide vertices around, just even remove faces if needed to just rebuild this face, this area. So for me, I'm just gonna slide some around here, just like that. Now, if your model was really bad, what you could do is go into orthographic views and take screenshots, basically, and use those as blueprints. And I would just start over. In this case, it's not needed because there's only minimal changes that need to be done. But when I'm making more complex designs or I'm really experimenting with a lot of changes and my surfaces are not good or as good as I want it to be, then yes, I can sometimes just rebuild the whole model. And don't discourage yourself. It's going to be a lot quicker than the first time because your design is already fleshed out and you can always improve it. But it's generally like a lot quicker. So yeah, I'm just gonna move around all the car, turn around, use the matcap, and switch between different lights just to see if some areas are bumpy or they're not what they should look like. That's pretty much it after that, honestly. We're gonna assign the materials and then we're gonna be done with this. So yeah, just turn around all the model, look in every direction, different angles, try to spot artifacts. But yeah, I'm pretty happy with how it looks at the moment. Like this area is a bit dense, but no big deal. It's only on the inside of the wheel arch. If your wheel arches were rounder, then it could cause a problem to have this many loops. Okay, so now you're gonna go into the file and then append, and you're gonna open your file browser, and with the video link in the description, you're gonna go to the Google Drive and download all the files. And you're gonna open the Opal Vinewood car paint material, and you're gonna select the car paint and just append it, and we're gonna use this one. After appending it, you can just assign it to your base mesh, and then your solid view may not look like this. It may look like a very dark metallic gray. So to fix this, it's very easy. I'm gonna show it in a few seconds after the materials have loaded in material preview. Just go to the top right corner in solid view ideally, and then switch back to object like mine is right now, and not to material, unless you prefer to model with this very metallic finish, but I don't. Alright, then we're gonna go into rendered view or material preview just to see what the paint looks like. And you can see that the flakes are a bit too big to be realistic. So we're just gonna adjust this into the scale of the flake. Just gonna type a number that's much bigger to reduce their size. This is very personal, so just play with it until you're happy. You can play with the roughness, the color, so I encourage you to take a few minutes just to play with it. And I'm gonna do this either off camera or inside the video quite a lot. You're gonna see it. So you can just play with the flake dispersion, flake roughness. Usually a value of roughness around 0.3 is pretty good.